Hello, my name is Elijah Kallenberg and my partner is Morgan, and we will be doing our project over wetland mitigation banks. So let's get started. The first thing we have to look at is what is a wetland mitigation bank, specifically as it pertains to ecology. The first thing we have to acknowledge is that it is essentially when a wetland is being created, restored, or enhanced, and this is typically done after anthropogenic events like farming or construction. And the way it's created is that an individual or organization establishes a line of credit with an established bank to specifically utilize those funds to create a wetland mitigation zone to offset the negative effects that they enacted while they were doing their anthropogenic activities. And the next thing we want to look at is where in the United States, specifically the country that wetland mitigation banks are prevalent, where in the United States are these wetland mitigation banks? And we can track this through the transfer of credits for the sole purpose of creating these wetland mitigation banks. And the areas provided are shown on the map. They're heavy in the east and west coast along with the south. But what this map isn't showing you is that this map has tracked within the last 10 years. Prior to this, it was also prevalent in the Great Lakes region as well as the north, like the Dakotas. So that's something to also be aware of. The next thing we want to look at is how wetland mitigation banks relate to wetland draining. Now, wetland draining, it's not a positive. It's a form of land management typically done through farms or construction sites with the sole purpose to drain water to make the land usable for their specific project. And now this obviously will have negative effects. This can dry out the land. This can make it uninhabitable for various species. The soil can be corrupted through the activities that are being taken place. And so that's where wetland mitigation banks come in. Their sole purpose is to offset the negative effects done through the anthropogenic project. Specifically, the anthropogenic project is wetland draining. And so its purpose is to establish and replenish the pre-wetland drained environment as close to that previous environment as possible. And the purpose of that is to bring back the species that were lost, bring back clean water to the area, and also just to bring back an overall healthy environment to the area that had been decimated by the anthropogenic wetland draining. And now the next thing we want to look at is when did wetland mitigation banks become part of the solution? Now, the first time they began to be utilized was under President Richard Nixon, and this was done through his 1972 Clean Water Act, in which it specifically provided outlets to enhance the environment, and one of those was to establish wetland mitigation banks. And then states following this ran with it and then expanded and established various wetland mitigation banks to provide credits to individuals to establish wetland mitigation areas to enhance the environment. And then from that point in history, we have seen this established and expanded through the EPA, in which it has expanded whatever it wants to do regarding wetland mitigation banks, and it has also provided more resources for these banks to get out to various states. As you can see, it's a highly prevalent concept as provided by the map a couple slides ago.
The economic costs of creating a wetlands mitigation bank are quite simple. The cost of building one can range from $4,000 to $350,000 per acre, depending on the area where it is created, so expense can be an issue. As well, the wetlands bank takes up land that could be used for economic development, such as factories, apartments, and more. The economic benefits to a wetlands mitigation bank would be its free source of clean water, which saves the area the extreme cost of having to buy clean water from other areas. It can also save money from future possible overflows of waterways, as it will provide an outlet so it won't damage infrastructure. The cost wetland mitigation banks have on the ecosystem would be the building of the streams or rivers can destroy habitats and wildlife that's already in the area, and the fact that the new wetlands would be considered at most subpar to the natural ecosystems that have been destroyed. The benefits of building a mitigation bank would include the conservation of wetland ecosystems, which restores natural resources such as non-polluted water and any wildlife habitats and diversity that were destroyed in another area. This in turn equalizes the net ecological loss, and since wetlands play a major role in the carbon sequestration or the removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the construction of these banks is important to the overall health of the earth. A successful example would be the Tatanka Wetland Mitigation Bank located in the Big Sioux watershed region. This watershed has a history of problems with polluted water, mainly from agricultural runoff. The Wetland Mitigation Bank creates credits for developers to buy as part of their permits to compensate for their future impacts on wetlands of the region. So far, the mitigation bank has been a success as it serves as a natural filter for the Big Sioux River as well as its own aquifer, which provides drinking water for the city of Sioux Falls.